Hey, hello everyone and welcome to Extreme Graphics Tech. My name is Angelo. And well, today, as you can see on the title of the video, we are going to be talking about the GTX 960 4GB version. Before I start, I have to say, no, I'm not saying you should run and buy this card or anything like that. It's an 8-year-old card. However, I'm always curious because I don't like to throw away old tech. I don't think, they should be in landfills or anything like that. I always believe they have some use, and I'm going to tell you today what this card is good for. And it's because we have now technologies like FSR that we can extend the life of our old cards. And maybe, just maybe you want to build a retro machine and you're thinking of not expending too much, because this card can be had on eBay for like $40 to $50. So I think it's maybe a little bit overpriced. Maybe it should be around 30 to 40, but still, it's better and sometimes cheaper than many of the alternatives, especially when you consider cards like the GT710 that can cost you like $30. So this one for, $10 more is a lot more performant than those cards. So maybe you're thinking, I got just an old machine, Lenovo machine or whatever it is, and I just want something to put like a GPU for retro gaming. So obviously this card is going to work for you for anything related to 16 and 32-bit. But what about, PlayStation 2, Switch, or PlayStation 3? And that's what we're going to be testing today. But not just that, because maybe you say, well, I would like to have some indie games, or can I play any new triple A games? Well, the answer may surprise you. So I like to give life to all technology. I don't like to just throw them away. So if you're looking for maybe build that computer for your little brother, for your cousin, or just to have a second machine in case the first one died, or maybe your GPU just died and you're just trying to save some money to buy a new and shiny one, and in the meantime you still want to play other games like maybe Street Fighter or Diablo. So let's see how those runs on the 8-year-old GTX 960. So, since we are going to be talking about emulation, I thought to start with something low. This is PSP. This game is one of the hardest one to move on the PSP, and we can move it at 4K, no issues with the GTX 960. So this is a very good start if you are asking me, even though it's an 8-year-old GPU that was middle by the time, it wasn't even top notch. This is still, very good if you're going to build like a retro machine, a retro PC to be able to move all your retro games in there. So this one is going to give you a lot of good quality, and this is just me pushing it, because at the end of the day what we care is a 1080p probably. So talking about 1080p, then the next we test is the 3DS. In this case I'm testing the Mario 3D Land, and we know this is a harder to emulate system because of the two screens, and the emulation is not so well advanced, so we had to lower the resolution to 1440p. But as I said, you are going to probably be gaming at 1080p with this GPU, but in any case, as you can see, we can play this no problems. Also, if you see, I'm playing this in a Windows, because for some reason when I put it full screen, we lose a lot of performance for whatever reason. I'm not quite sure where the fault is, if the GPU or the emulator. However, anyway, I was saying you can play this at 60 FPS without many issues. So that's a good start too with 3DS. So there we go. Now talking about one of the more recent computers, and the one that consoles, and one that Nintendo doesn't like us to talk about, is the Nintendo Switch. In this case, I'm playing Mario Odyssey, and well, it runs quite good and decent. And in this case, it's running a very good 60 FPS. However, there are some areas where the FPS are going to be lower, like around 50 to 55. I would say still a very good result. And yes, there are going to be some, say, the compilation stuttering, so don't worry too much about that. But yes, there are areas of these games that ran around 55 to 60 FPS. So it's not a perfect 60 FPS, and we are playing at original resolution because you cannot go over that if you want to keep a good frame rate. Now, however, having said that, when we play Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which is a very beautiful game. I finished it on the Switch, and I really like the game. And as you can see here, it looks very good. And this is interesting because I'm playing the game at original resolution. However, I am using a mod to allow the game to get to 60 FPS. And as you can see, we can get to around 45 to 50 FPS and even 60 FPS sometimes. Though this title is originally at 30 FPS on the Nintendo Switch. So yes, you're going to be able to play this if you don't care about, you know, some frame rate fluctuation. But if you do, then you can play it in the original frame rate, which is 30 FPS, no problems whatsoever. As you can see, we never really go under that. So here is another game that really surprised me, because this is a kind of heavy game and it runs at 30 FPS on the original hardware. So being able to run this game at almost perfect 60 FPS with this GPU is something I was not expecting. You know, I would have considered a very good result to just be able to move it at 30 FPS and call it a day. At the end of the day, it's not like we want to go you know, too much or very crazy with this one. Yes, and we're still at our original res. However, I still think this game is better to play at 1080p 60 than at 1440p 30. So yeah, good results for Yuzu here, and we can see how much this emulator has advanced over the time. Also, we go back to something like the PlayStation 2, which we know is not as powerful as any of the other consoles. However, it's a very hard to emulate or complicated system. So being able to play the games of PlayStation 2 at 4K with the GTX 960 is really something. You can have those perfect lines and, you know, having that great resolution for some old games that, you know, they still benefit for the resolution because they have this specific look, and that's quite good. So yeah, the GTX 960 is still proven to, if you want to build a retro machine, is going to be a very good one for that purpose, because it's going to run all your games really, really good. And to prove this, I tested many games, but obviously I'm not going to be showing them all. However, I did test the Silent Hill 2 game, as you can see here, and you know, just the beginning, and then I ran for a lot of time on the fog. But you know, I'm just showing you the beginning of the game, but you can get this performance no matter where you are. The game is still going to run at 60 FPS, and you see there the GPU is being used barely at this as a 4K. So the worst case scenario is that you're going to be playing at 1080p and you're not going to be using even 30% of the GPU capacity. So I don't think there is any game that is not going to run on this one. And now we go with something heavier. In this case, is PlayStation 3 and MotorStorm Pacific Rift. And as you can see here, the game is running fantastic at 30 FPS. Of course, I'm not using any sort of you know, frame rate unlocker, and we are running, yes, original resolution. However, we are playing PlayStation 3, guys, on the PC, and this is a fantastic game, and this is just a GTX 960 from 8 years ago, and we can play so good with this. I will say that even the fact that even if we are playing just original quality, to me it's mind-blowing that we can do this nowadays and with just a GTX 960. So yeah, there you go. This is going to be a fantastic GPU for retro emulation. Now also testing some very recent games that have been released. You can see here Street Fighter 6 that is being just released, running at perfect 60 FPS at 1080p low. Yes, the game has an option to limit the frame rate to 30, and maybe we can upper the graphic quality, but I think this is the way you have to play. 60 FPS for a fighting game is the way to go, and that's the way I prefer it. However, I have to say that the game will go under 60 FPS during like the intro and character presentation and some very flashy situations, but it's never during like actual combat, so I think that's okay, and you can enjoy this game at 60 FPS, no problems whatsoever. Now, having tested the RE engine on a Street Fighter 6, I thought, oh well, let's test it now at Resident Evil 4, especially because this is a game that, you know, it requires a lot of VRAM and a lot have been said. However, you can see there is only using 2.2 gigs of VRAM. We are limiting the frame rate to 30 FPS, and we set the preset preferred performance, and you can see the game is running a very good 30 FPS. So yes, you can enjoy this game even on an 8-year-old GPU at a very good quality, at least from my perspective, all things considered. You know, people claim that you need, like, you know, 3070, 2070s, 2080 Super or newer, otherwise you can enjoy games. And, you know, a lot of people can enjoy games in different ways, and 30 FPS is perfectly acceptable. If we are talking about 30 FPS, well, Spider-Man is not one of those games. These games, I tried to run at 60 FPS. I couldn't get it quite there using 1080p normal and dynamic resolution on. However, I think we are very close to achieve that, and I think the game is behaving quite good. However, if you want, you can just limit to 30 FPS and still have a much better experience than on a PlayStation 4, just to give you an example, and with a better quality and resolution. So in this case, as you can see here, by using dynamic resolution, we try to achieve those 60 FPS. And for many, even if you are going to fluctuate between 45 and 60 FPS, it's going to be more than playable. We have always to consider the hardware we're running things on, and what you can ask of them. Now, one of the worst, optimized game in recent years has been The Last of Us Part 1. And here I am playing The Last of Us Part 1 in low 1080p FSR balance with a 960 with only 4 gigabytes of RAM. And yes, the game is running, not in the best quality, but I still think it looks great. And even though, yes, you're going to get some lower frame rate than 30, can get to 25 from point to point, you have to think about the fact that you can play this game on an 8-year-old GPU, but you cannot play on a PlayStation 4. And I mean the remastered version, of course. I'm not talking about the original game. Another recent game is the Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and this game can run at 30 FPS at 1080p low using FSR balance. Yes, I know it's not the prettiest, but still, you're still able to play this while you can, unlike a last gen console. However, the game runs quite good, but I'm not sure if it's the optimization or the GPU, but some areas sometimes it runs perfectly fine, and the next run they run not that good. So I'm not quite sure where the problem is. What I mean is that this area, for example, is running at 30 FPS now, but the first run I did of this play, it was running like around 20 to 15 FPS. So it varies a lot, and I'm not quite sure who's to blame here. I'm going to be testing is the latest Need for Speed. As you can see, we can play at 1080p medium using dynamic resolution scaling and pointed to 30 FPS. Because honestly, when I was trying to get to 60 FPS, I was never really happy with the quality I was achieving. So I thought I was sacrificing too much, and the motion blur in this game is quite good. So 30 FPS in this game looks quite decent, to be honest, and very smooth. It's not like other games where it looks kind of jarring. So yeah, I know some people don't like to play racing games at 60 FPS, but you have to adapt to what you have. And in this case, the fact that you're still able to play this game, from my point of view, is still amazing, considering the GTX 960 is 8 years old. And the last game I'm going to be testing is a Diablo 4. This is just been released today for everyone, and it's a 1080p medium. As you can see here, with FSR in quality, the game is running at 60 FPS. I'm not showing much because I don't want to ruin the surprises for everyone, but let me just say that this game runs really good on the GTX 960. There are going to be some cinematics that run at 30 FPS, that's by the game's definition, and they also run without any issues whatsoever. Even when I was full of characters and everything, the game held very well. And you can have some slowdowns from time to time, but they are not serious or severe. So you can always lower the quality or lower the resolution or use a more aggressive FSR, but this game just runs fantastic. So as you saw, this car still have good life in it. And if you're trying to build a retro machine, I think this is a fantastic choice, because you're going to be able to play any emulation or any emulator, including Jedi games, which Switch games. I wasn't expecting it to run that good, but yeah, you can, and better, even sometimes with better resolution, like the PlayStation 2 or even the GameCube and Wii. So there is a lot to like about this little card. But even I was more surprised to the fact that you can play games like the just released Street Fighter 6 and Diablo 4 at very good resolution and frame rate. And if you're willing to go a little bit down with some AAA games and just play at 30 FPS, I will still provide you with a nice experience on some of them. Of course, you're buying an 8-year-old GPU, so there is compromises. You have to play on low, no more than 1080p, and maybe use FSR even in balance mode, which is not the best quality, but it will be better than playing like a 720p. So in that sense, I think, if you're looking for a very cheap GPU or something like that to build a retro machine, the 960 is still a nice little buy. I'm not saying this should be your main GPU, because obviously it's not going to play a lot of game and it's not going to play them well, but there are situations where you still need some power, but you don't want to spend that much, well, if you find like a 964 gigabytes for 30, 40, maybe even $50, depending on your region, I think, it's not money wasted, at least from my point of view. So I hope you like this video and see you on the next one.